My name is Satish Sankaran. I work for product management in the Redlands office. My focus area is essentially anything to do with Esri's open vision, anything to do with standard support, anything to do with interoperability across the stack, whatever the product might be. Right? So I look at it from a more holistic, higher level perspective, if you will. Joining me in today's presentation would be Chris Whitmore, who's part of the ArcGIS Online team. He's one of the engineers working on that team. Has kind of helped me quite a bit in terms of handling some of the interoperability related issues or aspects of the particular platform, especially ArcGIS Online and Portal. Okay, so this presentation, usually, if you look at the audience that comes for these presentations, there are really a couple of different kinds, right? You've got folks who completely understand what OGC stands for, if you will, Open Geospatial Consortium and Premier Standards Organization for geospatial stuff. They understand all that, the standards, but they don't quite know how Esri supports a lot of these standards. So that is one type of audience. Another type, people that come into these sessions, the people that don't quite follow this space, they go back to their organization. There are people in the organization say, talk about mandated standards, and there's a lot of internal discussion on how to make their systems and workflows and processes interoperable. So they come to these kinds of sessions to get a fairly high-level view of how the Esri platform can support those needs. And then, of course, there's another bunch of people who are probably not here, who understand standards very well, but want to have nothing to do with it. So, right? So they're not here. And then there's a fourth category, my friend Gerhard here, who understands the standards, understands everything of how we support, but he's nevertheless here to ask difficult questions, probably. Right? Okay. So I'm going to try and address it from a higher level, a general level. And to tell you the truth, we put this title together a while back, and I want to step back a little bit during the course of my presentation to not just talk about OGC capabilities, but you are essentially interested in a larger picture, I would assume, of how the platform is open enough to work with multiple other systems. Okay. So this is something you must have seen in multiple presentations today, but I just want to re-emphasize that, right? When you talk about the ArcGIS platform, there is the ArcGIS Online avatar of it, and then there's the ArcGIS Enterprise. The ArcGIS Online is hosted by Esri. It's a SaaS offering. The ArcGIS Enterprise is in your own infrastructure. So you've seen multiple presentations that talk to this. And I bring this up mainly to talk about this particular aspect, which is, if you look at the ArcGIS Enterprise aspect, there are multiple components to it: the server, the portal for ArcGIS, ArcGIS Data Store, ArcGIS Web Adapter, and so on. So if you look at the title of the presentation, there's this thing about how do we support OGC, how do you leverage OGC services within both ArcGIS Online and Portal. Portal is similar to Online in terms of the collaborating piece that lives and breathes within ArcGIS Enterprise. So I just wanted to make that part clear. Right? So, bottom line, all of these are part of the platform. The platform is a server. It's got data and content services. There's a collaborating piece there that could be your on-premise portal or ArcGIS Online. Then you have a variety of clients that can consume those. But when it comes to, understanding, defining, and talking about this is fairly easy. But you in the outside world have to deal with platform implementation. Getting clipped away a bit. I hope I don't run into this problem more. Let's see. Uh-oh. You know how to switch to the, I think it's still in that other mode, shared mode with multiple screens.
I don't think it's from my machine. I think he has to do it the API.
No, can you do it here? I think because I have a shared screen set up in the office, maybe that's what's causing it. Interoperability. Now we are back on track. Okay. So, the thing that you guys are interested in is, data interoperability, web services interoperability. How does your system talk with other systems using any of these open interfaces? Then there's this open source stuff. There's open data. There's open APIs, and so on. So, this is the larger picture that you as users are probably most interested in. So, you're looking for a system that is open, right? And open systems, traditionally we believe encourages innovation, supports interoperability, promotes transparency, improves reliability, and so on. So the question is, how does the Esri platform support open? The thing with open is, what is open? The many meanings of open, right? So it's very hard for people to agree with the meaning of open. I think we're okay. So the question is, some people, when they hear the word open, it's all about open source. For some people, they don't really care. An open API is fine. As long as they can ETL data in and out, they're okay with it, right? And the other thing that I've noticed is this other analogy you can draw where different people look at it, and they don't look at it from a holistic picture. They forget the elephant in the picture. They're just talking about different things that they see. So what we have noticed is over time, both to educate ourselves and to educate our users and to understand the space better, we realized that we needed to come up with a complete understanding of what Esri's open vision is so that we can communicate that to you, help you as users, and also help us target our implementations in a way in which it meets those requirements. So as we do that, we notice this, right? So as a user, a lot of people don't care about anything. They just want to ETL stuff in and out. As developers, sometimes for you, open basically means open source. You want to be able to actually get to the code, do something with it, etc. And then there are procurement personnel within various organizations who look at it as open basically means it has to be standards compliant. People have to build to a standards. And you as developers, if you're working in those organizations, etc., have therefore to be concerned with, how does this platform support standards and how can I use it, right? So to help with all of this, we came up with I would call it not a vision document, at least a website that walks you through this entire process. So it's a vision to help our users navigate the, treacherous terrain of open, if you will, and a vision to execute upon. So the interesting thing with this is, if you were to visit this website, you could go in and see how we look at it in a holistic perspective. So you could look at open standards, the various open standards that we support. You can look at data interoperability aspects of it, because a lot of you might be using FME, for example, right? So at the end of the day, you want to bring in a map info tab file or some other file or a GML file. You want to bring it into our system, and you just use an FME kind of translation device to kind of bring it in, right? And we have a data interoperability extension built on the FME stack that can make things easier for you. Then there is this newfangled thing about open data. A lot of people hear open and they think about open data because that is the new buzzword. It's how the large organizations, federal agencies are trying to make their offerings transparent enough for public accountability. Then there's open APIs. And open APIs are kind of the most important thing for at least people in this room. If you're developers, you just want to make sure that you have a reasonably easy, well-documented API that you can work against. Whether it is blessed by a standards organization or not, you want to have some API that you can work against that can, that's easy enough, that's restful in nature, that has some kind of a JSON binding that's easy to use. So different ways in which we can look at open, and so we put that one together. Having said that, this is the thing that we have noticed over time. We can all sit around a table and have this open platform discussion, and we talk of ETL, this, that, pragmatic ways of dealing with it, but the big elephant in the room is standards. Almost, depending on, it doesn't matter what agency you work for or who you interact with, there is a lot of hard requirements that standards be supported in various parts of the stack. So this is something that we have noticed over the years. So we've taken great pains to make sure that we can educate you on this particular topic and also provide you the solutions to see how you can support all of these requirements using our platform, if you will. And the other problem with open standards is it's like watching paint dry, if you will. It is extremely difficult for the untrained user, if you will, to completely understand the standards documents, follow all the arguments that go with it. And there are multiple standards organizations, right? The OGC, the ISO TC211, which is more of an international standards organization. You've got metadata that comes out of FGDC committees and so on. So again, it's not an easy space. So our job is to try and make it simple so that you don't have to deal with some of the complexity. Like I said, a lot of you probably don't care enough except to know that our platform is compliant. And for that particular reason, the Open Geospatial Consortium actually awards certificates of compliance. So at 10.5, we have 35 different such certificates certifying a variety of standards across a variety of our platform components. So when you look at standards de facto and de jure, there are data standards, there are metadata standards, there are web service standards, right? I mean, the standards for CAD and shapefile, CSV, GML, GeoJSON, GeoRSS, KML, whatever. The Geo package is one of the newer standards from OGC. If you look at metadata standards, there's the ISO, FGDC, Inspire, newer RDF-based standards like DCAT, et cetera, that have come into play as part of the metadata standards group. Then you have a variety of web service standards. So you can look at the Open Geoservices REST spec that we released a while back. So that is an open specification that you can use. And then there are those that come from actual standards organization like the OGC, which is the WMS, the WFS, WMTS, and so on. Web Map Service, Web Feature Service, Web Map Tiles Service, and a whole bunch of them. In the world of metadata standards, there are a variety of these standards. Not only are there a variety of standards, but there is a variety of profiles of these standards. A lot of people look at these standards and say, I know the standard is good, but it doesn't quite apply to my organization, so I'm going to go and tweak it. So every time somebody tweaks it, you get more standards, if you will. And the only way that we can handle it is we create something called ArcGIS metadata, a more generic container, so that we can just take any of these formats and make it a subset, if you will, of ArcGIS metadata. Instead of dealing with each of these individual ones, we try to keep a super standard of ours in which all these can somehow fit. So it's a complex space. On the services side, there are services for discovery, for view, for data access, and so on. And we support a variety of these across the platform, right? So here's the thing. To the uninitiated, OGC has a variety of standards, right? You don't have the time or bandwidth to even deal with a variety of these. The question is, out of these, only a few are really popular. The Web Map Service, the Web Feature Service, the Web Coverage Service. And if you're not really clear about what these are very analogous to some of the Esri REST services. You got an Esri mapping service, you got a similar or almost equivalent WMS service from OGC. You have a Web Feature Service from OGC, very much like a feature service. A Web Coverage Service is very much like our image service. A web processing service is very similar to, say, a geoprocessing service from our platform, right? So this is how we would like to, position our platform, if you will. It's an open and interoperable platform, and it's also a standards compliant platform supporting a variety of these standards. But here's the difficulty that we have, right? As a large vendor with a variety of products, we got to support a variety of these standards. But look at our platform components. We got to support all these standards in each one of these, if you will. The portal and ArcGIS Online needs to support it. Our developer solutions, the runtime JavaScript API need to support it. Our server needs to support it. Our desktop, ArcMap and Pro needs to support it, and so on. Today's presentation, and Chris is going to be actually demonstrating some of it, is just going to focus on the portal aspects of it, or the ArcGIS Online and Portal. How do they deal with some of these standards? Right. So if you look at ArcGIS Online, the help file clearly tells you what are the different formats that we support. If you look at the data formats help file, help page, it's going to talk about all the different data formats that we support. If you have a CAD file, how could you just zip it up and share it up in the portal so that others can come and take it and use it, and so on. So all that is discussed there. We also support formal metadata, some of what I showed you there, the Inspire metadata or the FGDC metadata. Those are all standardized metadata that go beyond the general Esri tag structure, right? Instead of just name, title, whatever, these are much more comprehensive metadata that deals with quality of service, quality of data, and things like that. Then a bunch of web service protocols, and these we will demonstrate as part of the demonstration today. So I'm going to spend just a few seconds here, just leave the slide up, because as you watch Chris do his presentation, this is some of the stuff that you might get to see, which is how do I register some of these different OGC services in my portal or online? How do I get to view some of these services? How would I actually create what we call hosted services? Imagine creating a WFS service in the cloud where all you do is to take data, push it up into the cloud, and automatically something happens there and a WFS endpoint is made available for others to use, right? A service that is created out of the data that you pushed in, but it's not just an ordinary service, but it's also an OGC compliant service. How do they work in a web app environment? How do we handle secured OGC services? Sometimes custom parameters are included in OGC service requests. How do we deal with formal metadata? And if you have some time, we could touch upon some of the API support for some of these services. right? So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Chris. Thanks, Chris.
How does this sound? Good. Nice. All right, as Satish has covered quite a bit of ground really quickly, he's really discussed and touched on all, a lot of what the platform supports and what is supported in ArcGIS Online and Portal. And what I really want to show you is the enhancements we made in the past year. ArcGIS Online and Portal, and I should stop for a second and say that ArcGIS Online and Portal is equivalent in terms of functionality for OGC layers as of 10.5. So everything I say with Portal, you should assume it's 10.5, and the same thing with Online. And it really comes in two buckets of serving and consuming. And in the past year, we made strides in both areas. First, for providing, you now have hosted WFS layers based off your feature data. You also have hosted WMTS. And let's dive right into that. And also, stop me at any time if you have a question or anything, and we can drill right into it. OK. So right here, I have a hosted feature layer. And this, straightforward. This is actually from a service definition file. It could be from a file geodatabase. It could be from a CSV. It could be from a shapefile, anything, really. And you have an option to publish as a WFS. And again, straightforward with title, tag, summary, et cetera. All the layers in the feature layer will be made available in the WFS as well. And to save time, I have one ready to go. So I have a hosted WFS published from a hosted feature layer that has about 10 layers in it. And as you know, oftentimes WFS has, the server has, tons of layers, and you can work and select any of those layers. And we have the same behavior with hosted WFS. When you add it to the map viewer, you're prompted to select which layer you want. In this case, we'll select counties. And sorry, the network's a little bit slow. And you can continue to add layers as you see fit. And also, I'll talk about this more in a couple minutes, but at this time, you would also have the option to specify custom parameters. Let's add airports. All right. Looks like that one got dropped. All right, this will work. So with hosted WFS, and WFS in general, is that we provide access to the attribute information, which sometimes in the case of WFS is not very easy to determine how to present attribute information. But we make educated guesses, and it comes across pretty well. And as part of that, you can symbolize, although right now it's basic symbology, but eventually we do want to evolve to support smart mapping with WFS. There's some work to get to that point, though. And maybe most importantly is that you can perform analysis on WFS layers. You can do geo-enrichment, you can do buffering, you can, the full set of tools is available to use on WFS, whether that's hosted or one that's being provided into the system. And lastly, you can configure pop-ups. The same thing with any other layer in ArcGIS Online that has a query capability. You can configure the attributes, or an HTML attribute display.
Hey, Chris, if I can just interrupt for a second. Sure. So anything that Chris is showing here with the map viewer and online or portal is made possible because there is JavaScript API support for these. That is how we built this solution, which means it is available at the API level. So if you have to do anything with WMS or WFS or any of the other specs, which you see working within the map viewer, that means the JS API supports it, and you can take it from there.
Yep, good point. Yeah, anything you can build in the map viewer, you can then immediately put into a configurable template, any JS API application, and you'll exactly what you see is what you'll get. And then also one point I want to make is that, Same behavior from search. Oh, I actually added the feature layer. However, you could see the prompt to add each layer, work with the layer the same way you would as if you're the owner or non-owner. It doesn't matter. And let me get back to the beginning spot. And the last thing I want to say about this aspect of the WFS is that in the drop-down where you can select each layer, if you want to focus that experience where you only have one layer, you can then save this as an individual WFS layer. So if you did have, you had all your data and you had it spread across multiple layers, as I do in this case, but you want to provide a focused experience, like I only wanted to show counties and make that available as a WFS layer, you can do that as well. So the next part is at hosted WMTS. There is no publish workflow other than you need to publish your hosted tile layer. And that could be from a TPK, that could be from a service definition, could be really from any way you can create a hosted tile layer. To access it, it's the same way you would on ArcGIS server. From the services directory, and this was on the item details page, click view URL. And then in the service directory, you can access a WMTS capabilities document.
So unlike with the hosted WFS, every single tile layer that's ever published is automatically also available as an OGC WMTS layer.
Yes, it's not, this is one published 5 years ago, one published today. There's no manual step necessary. The only manual step is just accessing the capabilities doc to either take it out of the system into maybe a data catalog, or then to add it as an item and make it available to the users in your organization. So this is a step they don't need to do. And actually have this created already. And one important point to make with the hosted OGC with WMTS and WFS is a layer must be shared publicly. Right now we don't support web tier authentication. That would be, that's a long ways off really. And then token-based authentication, there's no technical reason it doesn't work other than tokens expire. And so it's not something that we support at this time. So the layer must be shared publicly. And then so I took that capabilities URL and added it right here. And this adds a reference to the capabilities document for the WMTS. And now you share this with your organization, you share it with the public, and they'll be able to work directly with the WMTS endpoint. And actually, one additional point I want to make with WFS is Satish talked about form metadata and what we support for ArcGIS Online and for the platform, where ArcGIS metadata is a superset, and then we support different standards within that, and really allows us to support a lot of different specifications and standards. When you have your hosted feature layer, we have let me drill into this. We have a metadata editor. And this is actually available for all items in ArcGIS Online and Portal. But what it signifies for WFS is that whenever you author your metadata in the hosted feature layer and then you publish a WFS from it, that metadata is carried forward to the WFS capabilities document. So if you take the WFS out of ArcGIS Online and put it into a different data catalog, there's going to be metadata associated with the capabilities document. Right now, it's just 10 properties or so, but we're going to grow that over time. And it's also, we'll also work on synchronization and stuff like that. So that's good for hosted capabilities for WFS and WMTS and serving it out. And you saw just a second ago that I added the WMTS capabilities document, the URL, here as an item. And this is what I want to call out now is that, so we did that with a hosted version, but for any WMS, WFS, or WMTS as external, you can add it here as an item. And what that will do is it will add a reference to that OGC layer, and then you can share that, and it brings a visibility into your organization to be able to share it out. And depending on the layer, we offer different options to be able to select. For the WMS, you can select all the layers. In the WMS, the ones you want to make available, it could be a subset, it could be all. For WMTS, it's you can select the specific layer you want. The specific layer you want. In this case, there's only one layer. And then if there is a different projection, you can also select the projection as well. And so if your WMTS has actual multiple layers, you would need to add each layer individually. And that's the same thing for WFS. Let's see, which one is it? You're prompted to add each layer individually. So I already have a web map ready to go with these layers in it. Let's see. Yeah, sorry, this is really slow.
So I'm just going to take a minute of your time here.
Sure.
So one of the things that in an organization, when you were working with these things, right? I mean, come decision time, you've got this thing, and I call it making a choice between functional and non-functional stuff. Non-functional doesn't mean not important. Functional is what I'm calling, you want the system to be highly performant, highly scalable, those kinds of things. And non-functional is it has to be standards compliant in the sense it has to be interoperable, it has to be extensible, portable, and so on. Sometimes these don't necessarily gel well with one another. The WFS being an example where if you have thousands of features which are being returned by the WFS as GML, which is an XML encoding, you will notice extremely slow speeds. It's the nature of the beast, both at the place where it is being produced as well as in a web environment, compared to a totally RESTful Esri API which is spitting out GeoJSON or JSON, right? So you have to make those decisions. And our goal is to make sure that we do all the stuff that we think really works. It's pragmatic approach, if you will. But we also want to make sure that these systems are interoperable. So there are times when you have enabled a lot of these for interoperability purposes, but if you're looking for very scalable, performant, quick systems, you need to choose between the APIs that you do. So in the first case, he had already got a hosted feature service, and he enabled WFS on it. So you can provide either of these URLs appropriately depending on who needs it. If they're connecting from a non-Esri system and the only thing they can do is a WFS, well, you give them the WFS URL. It's going to be a lot slower, but at least they're able to get something. So I just want to put that in context.
Oh yeah, cool. Thanks, Satish. All right, so I have, in this case, I have a WFS and a WMS in a web map. And what I want to show is the layer options that are specific to each type. So for WFS, this is what I talked about or alluded to a few minutes ago, is that we offer some advanced configurations, and if those of you that work with WFS fairly regularly, you may be familiar with maximum feature count. And we have a default of 3,000, but that may be different for each WFS. We've seen WFS that have a maximum feature count of 20, and if you request 21, everything kind of bombs. So you can configure that as you know it. Sometimes it's a little bit of esoteric information to actually have to know the service or be the service provider. And additionally, we also offer the option to swap XY coordinates. And sometimes these take you down a troubleshooting path because it's not necessarily advertised. OGC spec is more should rather than must. And then additionally, we also support custom parameters. So in the WFS case, the primary use case would be providing an access token. So if you have a token-based secured WFS, you can provide the access key here, and then we would include that in all requests to retrieve the features. And similarly, with WMS, we also offer custom parameters. And so this may be styles, style layer descriptors. It could be time values. It could be elevation values. It could be an access token as well. And we offer to append the custom parameter to all or layer only. So if you have a style you want to use, that might be for the layer only. But if you have a token, that would be to append to all requests for access. And in this particular example, I have an elevation parameter set to 1,000 meters. And if I remove that, you see the data changes, the request changes, including this custom parameter when sent to the WMS service. And which one is it? Okay. And then we have the same thing for time. And it's sometimes not easy to get those parameters.
A lot of what Chris is showing looks fairly esoteric, and that's not Chris's fault in a sense, right? It is what it is, and that's how the standards work, and that's why some of these user interfaces look unnecessarily complex, but you don't have a choice because we are receiving services, standardized services, quote unquote, from vendors all over the place. And although they're standards-based services, they all have their crazy idiosyncrasies that we have to deal with. So we have to provide all these extra switches that we can to somehow bring it. Like you said, a swap XY, correct? I mean, that sounds really stupid, if you will, that somebody could not advertise how those things, but even from a standards perspective, there has been some confusion in how that thing is actually managed. So at the end of the day, we said, okay, let's just put this one in so that if you get somebody who's doing the wrong thing, we'll still be able to consume it.
Yep. We make the best guess possible from the information we have, and then provide the tools, hopefully, to get you to be successful if that guess is not correct. And in this case, you saw that I specified a time custom parameter, and the data was, or the rendering was updated for the WMS. Let's see. Oh, and one under the radar functionality that enhancement that we added in the last year is pop-ups for WMS, and this is really nice. Although the pop-up is less than ideal, but that's WMS basically. Okay, so as part of the custom parameters, I talked about token-based security for OGC, and this applies also to WMTS. You can do the same thing with WMTS to include a token and an access key. However, we also now support web tier authentication. The key to that is really two things: is the server must support cores, and then you must configure your ArcGIS Online organization or your portal to make a cores request to these different domains to say like, oh, it's okay to provide my credentials to this domain. I will walk through these steps to do that. And actually, one thing while that's loading, let me get back to the map here, because one point I want to make is that all of the options that I showed on the layer menu in the map viewer, they would all be here when you add the layer. So you don't have to add the layer and then configure afterwards. You can configure the token and the access key or any styles or any custom parameters as part of the initial process of adding the layer. And then one other thing is that this footnote help us improve the site by sending us the URL via the Contact Esri link. If you have an OGC service that isn't working, it's not performing as you expect, definitely send to us, because it's, we have an internal geo server stood up and we, use that for testing, but really so much of how we drive improvements and bug fixes is really based on feedback we get from services that don't work, whether it's from distributors or users that contact us, through this link, and the dev team looks at this and drills right into it right away and provides feedback, pretty quickly.
Again, like Chris said, this is the nature of the beast, right? You've got thousands of services from different kinds of vendors, all following quote unquote a standard, but they're not necessarily all the same. So the only way for us to improve is to, every time somebody sees a bug if you can report it back to us, then we go in and tweak it. We have no other way of improving other than that.
Yeah, and we've also seen that oftentimes maybe it's a service provider that they're testing in ArcGIS Online and it doesn't work as expected. That we can take a dive into their service and then we provide feedback. Hey, these are the tweaks you need to make. It looks like maybe this is a gray area in the spec, but if you change this will be copacetic with ArcGIS Online and it should work everywhere else as expected. All right, so to support web tier authentication, you have to configure your organization to support cross-domain requests to that OGC service. To do that, in your organization settings under security, in the trusted servers list, you would add that domain. And it needs to be protocol specific. So if it's HTTPS and HTTP, you need to add both, or if it's one or the other. And then once that is added, it's actually don't guess I need to do that. From that point, it's pretty simple. I have a WMS secured with basic authentication, I believe. Sorry, I authenticated this one previously. However, what this essentially does is it allows the the credentials box from the OGC service to bubble up here, and then from that point on, the browser takes care of it. So it's not ArcGIS Online actually never sees your credentials, never even acts as an intermediate step to get your credentials and pass it on. From that point on, the only thing that changed is that your organization said it's okay to make this request and to show this credential box in your organization. Then the browser controls the rest of it. And as you see in this case, that I wasn't prompted. My browser is actually storing this from a previous run of this. And then for one other thing is open data. If you have data in open data, or if you're looking for data, we offer the ability to retrieve data versus, with a variety of formats. GeoJSON, GeoService, as WMS, and then you can also download as a spreadsheet, KML, shapefile. And the WMS is available if the service supports it. And then, as Satish mentioned, it's more than just OGC. We support, quite a bit of, various open standards, whether it's KML, which has, been around forever, GeoJSON, CSV, GeoRSS, tile layers where you have your flat file storage and you have a parameterized URL where you specify the ZYX. And many of those have been, baked in for a few years, but it's definitely something that we support coming into the platform, maybe taking it into a hosted feature layer. Something like a GeoRSS, you can add directly to a web app, with KML, or you can also export as GeoJSON or CSV or KML. And I think that's all I have. Any questions?
So, yeah, just to summarize a bit, right? So, as a product manager at Esri, I mean, I work on all these things in terms of working with development and also doing public outreach. But I'm also very strongly involved with the OGC. I am on a couple of committees. I work with the actual people that work on the spec. We provide our input as a major vendor in this area. So, you know, I understand the complications on both sides. Because when we are in a room discussing how the spec needs to come out, we have got multiple opinions, and it's a consensus body. So we have to take everybody's opinion into consideration, and every edge case needs to be factored into the process. And that's what makes some of these complicated and difficult, but that's just the nature of the beast. So that is why, you know, at least in my presentation, I was trying to take a more holistic view to say, yes, we do support OGC, but I'm hoping that all of you understand and can evangelize and talk within your organization. Interoperability is absolutely important, and it would be stupid to say that we can build a GIS system that's not truly interoperable, because it doesn't serve anybody anything, right? So we want to make our system open, but like I said, again, what does open mean? So we want to tackle the different flavors of open. If you look at the WFS as an example, WFS, when it came out, and today it still talks about GML, the XML binding, as the way to push data forward. But if you look at GeoServer, one of the open source servers capable of handling a lot of OGC services, their WFS actually can spit out GML, but also spit out JSON, and our WFS does too. It's not part of the standard. But sometimes over a period of time, vendors have got together and said, you know, standards sometimes, you know, are the base to work off of. They're not a ceiling in a sense, right? So people have innovated around standards. So if you take some of the open source folks, what they have done is they have built OGC-centric software, and then they have, you know, got into a bind where they've had to put in vendor-specific stuff to extend around it. We, on the other hand, have not been OGC-centric, if you will. We've done what we have done based on our R&D work that we do. But we have made sure that we also provide these alternate ways, pathways, for you to be able to interact with our system. And that's why if you have an option, if you have the ability to, you know, work with the right folks within your organization and the conversation about an open platform come up, open is really what you have to look at it from a holistic perspective. What problem are you trying to solve? The REST API is open, if you will, right? You can take the REST API, you can build your own server that serves out Esri feature services. There are no copyright violations, nothing. It's not patented or anything. It's open. It's an open API. If you want to deal with GeoRSS, if you want to just spit out GeoRSS feeds, because that makes a lot more sense than a much more, you know, complicated, heavy spec, then you should choose that one. As developers, I'm probably preaching to the choir here, but many a times you will be working on projects, working in organizations where there will be hard requirements to meet some of these standards. And we want to make sure that you can meet those requirements, but I think we all have to make, you know, a judicial selection here as to what makes sense in what context. So that was something I just wanted to make sure, re-emphasize, if I didn't kind of get that message across. And sometimes when I do this messaging, I don't want it to sound like, you know, some of these standards are so old, et cetera, et cetera. The standards have a purpose in life. Just make sure that you're using it for that particular purpose, if you will, right? And we're doing everything we can to make sure that we abide by the hard requirements of the standards. And like I said, the compliancy tests that we are subjected to for these standards are pretty harsh. So we want to make sure that we actually do it in such a way that it actually passes all those compliancy tests. So with that, we would really like to take some questions, though. At least, you know, your opinions on how it works in your organization and so on. Yes?
You didn't show anything about metadata and OGC metadata. Metadata were included in Portal recently, but there's no interface to search through them, at least not that I know of.
So,
and so we still need the open source Esri Geo Portal to be able to work really with catalog services and really manage metadata. So is there any plan that will be integrated integrated in portals?
Yes. So actually, so part of it is like we actually work pretty closely with the GeoPortal team because they've taken, they're a step farther than the rest of the platform in terms of metadata. So let me go to. So,
sorry.
Good, no, go ahead.
So as Chris is bringing it up, we get your question. And fundamentally, it is this, right? So there is simple tags that you can use with an ArcGIS Online and Portal, and there's and there's formal metadata. So we have an ability now to attach formal metadata to some of the items, but we want the formal metadata to also participate as a full citizen in searches. And then you want to be able to use an OGC standardized way of even doing those searches using the catalog services web specification. And what you were saying is we have a GeoPortal server that can do a lot of that stuff, but it doesn't happen within the portal. So our intention is to, somehow extract some of those functionality and make it available as part of this. But the idea is it is complicated in the sense we want to make sure that we still retain the basic way in which online and portal works, so that this extra baggage that comes in doesn't, I hate to use the word pollute, doesn't complicate this environment. So because it is useful for a separate class of people, but for the regular users, it has to be transparent so that they don't have to deal with it.
This is a very active area for us, though. I mean, like this is, what you're saying is not, it's not new feedback. In fact, we discuss this quite a bit, and usually we leave with more questions than answers and a lot of opinions on the best way to do this. But going in that direction, this is the metadata editor for ArcGIS Online. It's been included in Portal since I believe 10.4. And if you work with GeoPortal, you would recognize this. This is the metadata editor in GeoPortal. And this is one of the first steps we've done towards taking what they've done and their concepts and their expertise and bringing it in the platform. And it was going to be an active area for us in 2017 and going forward.
Chris has a Friday afternoon meeting every other week, and we're still having those meetings, but we haven't come to how best to get this thing done.
Yes, we're getting there. It takes because one of the challenges is that this isn't an ArcGIS Online solution. It's not a portal solution. It's with your existing data. It's with the platform. It's we don't want it to be where we have this solution, like, okay, here's this new solution, it works everywhere in the platform. Everything else you did before, scrap it. You need to do this now. We're very aware of migration plans, of having your metadata in one location, and you don't have to copy and paste it across, every single app that you want to make it available through. And like with what I was talking about with the WFS capabilities doc can be a subset of metadata. It's things like that. We want to have it be either synchronized or a pristine copy that we carry around, and that's make it available. So, if it's something from your ArcGIS server, is that that's the metadata that users see.
Any additional questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, you showed that in ArcGIS Online, if you publish a hosted feature layer, you can publish that as a WFS.
Correct.
I was talking to the ArcGIS Enterprise team yesterday.
Yes.
Said in 10.5 Portal, you have the option to publish a hosted WMS.
No.
And when I go in Pro to publish from Pro to Portal, it only has a WMS option, not WFS.
So is this the version 1.4 of Pro?
Yes.
So I think, go ahead if you know.
Okay, I got lost somewhere in this conversation. But you're talking of Pro, you're talking of ArcGIS Pro, and you have some data there, and you are publishing to the portal, and you're enabling WMS. So that is the equivalent there is essentially you're pushing all the data to your data store. You're spinning up a WMS, an ArcGIS map service, as well as enabling WMS on it, and you're registering those as WMS.
Shared publicly so we can pull those
Correct,
out.
correct.
Programs that can only read WMS.
Correct.
So they were telling me that it's WMS for ArcGIS Enterprise is a host. You could have a hosted WMS. Was that not true?
No. So essentially, what it is like as I the WFS case that I showed and I'll get to WMS in a second. It's a by value. You know, so whenever you actually publish, well, it's a by value. You know, it's a let me stop for a second. So you have your hosted feature layer data, and that's actually truly your data in the cloud. The WFS has a direct, you know, access to that feature data. When you're publishing a WMS from Pro to Portal, the WMS is actually by reference to your existing map service. And that's something that we don't offer in online yet. It's an active area for us, but it's actually is very challenging from a DevOps and architecture perspective to support that. So it's kind of like, you know, so essentially the WMS workflow in Pro is similar to what you've been able to do with, you know, on-premises ArcGIS server for quite a while. They'll be able to, you know, provide WMS access.
So in the back, all it has done is created a map service in the ArcGIS server and made a WMS out of it and shown that as an item in your portal is what the Pro app has done.
So right now we can have WMS in Portal and only WFS in online.
Only hosted WFS in online. And
Hosted
hosted,
services.
correct.
Yeah, and then, you know, yes, basically. And then you can also register that WMS with ArcGIS Online, which is essentially what Portal is doing behind the scenes as well. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. More questions? Any ArcGIS Online questions? You've got the right guy here in the seat. Doesn't have to be OGC.
Oh, only good ones.
Only
Easy ones.
Only easy ones. So how many of you are actually, you know, developers who have had to work on OGC stuff, who might have to work on leveraging some of the OGC stuff? How many of you have worked with WMS, WFS, and probably open source tools and so on? I just want to get a temperature of the room as to how many of you are, you know, involved in some of this stuff. Okay.
Now, are these secured, like with WebTier or token-based?
Anything else?
Nope, that's it for me.
All right, if we don't have any other questions, we will leave a little early then. Thank you very much for coming in. Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks everyone.